First things first, how is the vibe in San Francisco?
I think it's pretty cool. Everyone is crazy about AI. First time we came here in 2020, no one cared about AI. Everyone was into like SaaS, B2B. Before there was scooters, if you remember, that was a big
Yeah.
deal. And then in Toronto, we were talking about AI. It was more exciting. Fast forward 4 years, everyone's talking about AI.
Yeah, I think in general, the vibe in San Francisco is really nice. There's lots of events, and I'd say 95 plus percent of the events always have a topic around AI. Even if it's for a vertical industry, they always some talk about AI. There's definitely feels a lot of energy in San Francisco, going to events, meeting founders, and there's so many things that people are working on right now. I think if you are not in San Francisco and make a trip here, you maybe feel some FOMO in a way, because there's a lot of exciting stuff that people are working on. You can go to a random event that is about AI and you'll see some really interesting projects, lots of ideas. So today we want to talk about the convergence of software companies and outsourced service providers, but in general, just the convergence of software and services. So, what's the big insight here?
I think one thing we've observed with all these advancements in AI is how easy it's getting to offer services. So things that traditionally required humans could now be automated, which means we can almost reach the software margins.
Yeah, I think the big insight here is that AI makes it possible to provide service pretty much at the unit economics of software. So what does that mean? Let's try to break it down. Typically, software, the sort of the characteristics of the software business is that you build software once, you build a product once, and you can have that product sold multiple times to a virtually unlimited number of people. So you can meet unlimited demand for software. And every time you have a new customer and you just give them a copy of the software or of the same service, there's basically near zero marginal cost to offering that. So the big insight is that AI now for the first time makes it possible for services to be provided at the same unique economics of software. And so what we want to talk about is what does that mean for both software companies and also for service providers, right? I'd imagine more software companies would want to get into the services sector. So when you think of SaaS, it's software as a service. So there's part of that idea already in software companies. But what we're talking about here is taking a bigger and bigger chunk of what is typically or traditionally considered a service business, right? When we think about outsourced services today, you have customer support, call centers, admin assistants, data labeling, data entry, all of those services that you typically outsource may be able to be replaced or automated with AI agents. What do you think about that?
I think it's certainly getting there. I think when we are thinking about startups and like just building products, we should aim at whatever GPT-5 is going to offer us. And by the time GPT-5 arrives, a lot of this would be possible. I think there is still some tooling needed around this. For example, we need to figure out how to stop hallucinating, how to prevent our models from hallucinating too much, and then how to reliably offer services information that is like fact checked, verified, maybe have some kind of database lookups. But once you have that, and especially for very constrained industries, could be DevOps, could be software engineering, could be legal services, where your model can do fact checks and look up for the actual information. I think those are just ripe for disruption. And that's where services could be just automated and be super custom.
If you imagine today, like we're running a company and we don't buy or get or acquire some of those services. And it's a combination of things, right? It's a combination of the cost of acquiring it and also the quality that you might get for some outsourced service. Let's say that we are setting up a call center and it's not cheap to do that. Like you need a certain kind of scale, a certain number of customers or customer interactions. And at that point, you would hire an agency, an outsourced company that can help you handle those calls. So when the cost of that starts getting really low, I'd imagine every company wants to provide the best customer service they can and make their customers happy. Instead of setting up a whole call center with a lot of people, they might just want to use a service that automates that part of the support flow. And so what does it look like? Like it seems like if that is the case, where the unit economics for those services are low, it just means more people are going to buy or use more of these services. Is there such a thing as you think as the perfect customer support for any company? And do you think we can get that with AI?
Customer support per.
Right. Think about it, right? So customer support, everyone wants it, right? Every company wants it, and every customer on the other side would like to be served perfectly in real time all the time. So if that becomes like an API call per interaction, and that API call is like a cent or 5 cents per interaction or per minute, it just makes economic sense to just use more of those services to serve your customers and to grow your company.
So customer support call. I remember we were talking about this when Apple is going to come over and deploy ML models on edge on devices, and then those models know a lot about you. And then we were like brainstorming about this idea where like each one of us maybe in the future can have a clone, like digital clone of us, and then that would encompass all our preferences. And then that's how companies can offer us better services. Maybe there's a world where like the perfect customer support service is the companies can talk to Avatar, and then just Avatar talks to you like, okay, this is just resolves all those issues for you. It's just like ideal world where you don't even have to worry about addressing your issues. The one level before that would be, yeah, chatbot, or maybe even like you can call and then talk to a bot, and it's not as choppy as today. It's like a boss where press 1, press 2, and then it just knows exactly what you're trying to do. And I think the company information is also like a limited domain that you can fine tune your model and offer better services. You can unblock your customers with those bots much better. What do you think?
I'm not sure. Do you think we can get there? Let's say with the models we have today, it might be a little bit hard to take on the role of supporting customer support completely, like 100% fully automated. From a technical perspective, it would require a few things, right? Like it will require really good models, which we can assume we will have just at the pace of all the development of the models that we're seeing now. So really good models. Is that everything? Do you think with just good models we can get there? And for what kind of services do you think that would make sense?
Yeah, I think we can get there. I believe even with the current GPT-4, if we can fine tune it for our industry, we can probably get pretty far. Because most of the time, for example, your bank, right? There's a charge that you never authorize. You can probably just chat with a bot at the GPT level, maybe with some voice over it. And having access to APIs, it could probably resolve your issues. But I suspect that once we get to GPT-5, it's going to be even easier. Now, the question is, how do we fine tune those models?
So you would think we'd have to fine tune models to be able to really build AI agents that can handle all the different use cases. So let's say that today I run a call center and I want to say, hey, these software companies are coming after me because they're building all these AI agents. Would it make sense for me to, given all the customer conversations that I'm handling today, build a model and fine tune it with data I have, and then completely transform my call center into an AI call center? Or do you think it's a more direct approach for it, that software companies will start trying to build software to just be the call center from the ground up?
Yeah, I think that would be a startup. I don't see AT&T building their own models. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I don't see them building their own models and then building their chatbots. It's probably going to be a startup. But the question that you're asking is, should they be collecting data maybe now to potentially train their models?
Because if fine tuning is required, then data is required for it.
I think we do need to fine tune regardless. No matter how great GPT-5 will be, they still don't have access to your domain knowledge. Like a lot of the API calls is in your backend infra. So you don't really know how to even access them in public.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was what happens to budgets. So today, software companies, companies in general, they spend money on buying software. And separately, they have a budget for a headcount. When we have really good AI agents that can do some of the services or knowledge work that you typically do, then it feels to me that the budgets will also converge, or it'll be less of a separated budget where you say, I have budget for software, I have budget for people. I think it's going to all kind of start looking the same, especially for the kind of work that you can automate or replace with an AI agent. And so I don't know how that exactly looks, but imagine we're running a company and we have a VP of like finance, VP of sales, and then we're at budget conversations, right? I could either hire a couple of people or I could buy this software that this startup is offering me that performs some of the service or knowledge work provided by the people. But then it costs you more, but not so much more that you have to hire, let's say, 3, 4, 5 people. So I feel like there's a bit of movement or disruption in the way that companies do budget planning, because the conversations will start to just blend in. It's okay, is this a people budget or a software budget? And maybe it's going to be this new budget. And that money is just used to perform the tasks you need to hit your KPIs for your particular function or role. And so that could be interesting. I don't know how that's going to play out, but I feel if the work starts looking the same, then I think the budget will also start looking the same, or you talk about them in the same ways.
Yeah, I think historically, whenever you wanted to do something, imagine like back in the days before we even had a tool, like caveman, hey, I need to like hunt this mammoth. And then, yeah, I need like 5 people. And then they just run out and then hunt the mammoth. And then as we developed, and now that we have tools, now we have them separate. But I can see how going forward with AI, the thing that we consider tool will almost blend with the things that we usually consider are human tasks. For example, as a software engineer, maybe like, okay, to build this, I need a senior engineer, a junior engineer. But junior engineer could be Copilot. And that would be interesting to see how do you budget even for that? Because now with the people, you can guesstimate the hourly rate. But with the GPT, I think you have to go through a lot of that yourself. Like first, maybe writing your own unit test, then like outsourcing unit tests to Copilot, and then be like, okay, this is how long it would take for Copilot to do this. This is how much I'm going to spend, and this is how much I'm going to need to refactor it myself.
Yeah, I think we will try to unbundle. So like maybe it's a world where we don't do anything hourly. It might just be a world where we break down work into tasks or into like units of work or units of tasks. And so it's not like, okay, I need this many man hours or this much headcount. I need this kind of work done. I need to write 100 tests. And maybe we break it down. So like the budgets might not even be the same way we talk about them today. Whereas, yeah, I have $1 million to spend in software and then $5 million to spend on headcount. It's just I have 6 million in tasks that need to be performed to meet my KPIs, which is maybe an interesting way to look at this whole budget thing.
I also think it will change the way we think about tasks. Because today, when we budget for a feature of a task, we budget time. And then even that is really hard to budget for. You don't know how long the feature is going to take. If you have AI writing most of the code, you need to budget for just checking the results. Probably still need humans in the loop, like just checking the results and whatnot. But it almost reminds me of this NP problem versus P. So instead of us spending all this time writing code and then checking it, writing code is going to be done by AI, which is the long and difficult process, but then verification is going to be done by humans. This reminds me of this music producer, Rick Rubin. I was watching his interview, and the guy is, I don't know how to write music, I don't know how to sing, I don't play any instruments, but he's like a big shot in music industry. And then the interviewer is like, okay, then what do you do? He's like, oh, I just know what I like. And thinking back at it, I think a lot of the jobs going to converge to that. It's going to be mostly, okay, here are all the results that AI produced. Tell me what you like. And those with the best taste probably going to be like the best experts in the future. I can totally see that, for example, in more creative fields like art, music, poetry, whatnot. When the most productive people are the ones with the best taste, that can just shift through a bunch of work that were done by AI and just pick the ones that they like and they know it will resonate with the larger community. And probably most productive software engineers are going to be the ones that can they can write better prompts and then just maybe write something like a unit test to confirm that whatever AI has written is correct. So it just shifts the work from actually producing the code, the music, or something that the final result that people will interact with, to verifying it.
That's interesting. Later, we'll talk about GitHub's new products and a lot of the tools and products that people are building today to automate software engineering and software development work. It has those properties where it's about setting up a plan of work, executing the plan, and developers can go and edit, tweak a little bit, and then just like push that. But one thing I wanted to talk about is this thing that we noticed recently with AI startups offering platform plus service. Just talking to founders here, I find it to just be happening more often. So if you go back in time, 3, 4, 5 years ago, most of the startup ideas that we hear, they're like a SaaS thing, maybe a consumer app, but mostly like a B2B SaaS thing, just pure software. And it offers some sort of service. But what we're seeing now is companies that offer a platform, so a foundational software layer, and then add a layer of service on top. So one of those companies, for example, they're helping you write unit tests for your team, right? So you run an engineering team and you're coding, you're building your app, but then you also have to write tests, unit tests, and automate those. So they offer a platform that helps them quickly generate some tests, and then they'll have in-house developers and QA engineers who would then review the tests and then push those tests to their customers. And so from the customer's perspective, they can basically automate the service of quality assurance, right? But the startups, the companies offering the service, they have this platform plus service approach, which I think is very interesting. And I think this plays into the trend that we're seeing where I think a lot more of this will happen, and more companies, more software companies will start offering more and more services. Building a B2B SaaS app is very easy today. Like the building part of it, obviously discovering the need that you built for is the hard thing. But once you know what you need, building it is relatively easy. And so you could argue that all the easy stuff is picked. It's like low hanging fruit, right? So when you get to a point where there aren't a lot of big, simple ideas that you can quickly build for, then you want to look at how do you expand that market so that you can build new things that you couldn't build before. And AI really makes a difference here. It really shifts all the B2B SaaS apps that you have today into, hey, can we also offer service? Because then it's a new revenue stream. It's higher margins if you can potentially automate that with AI agents. And so it's almost as if software companies, TAM, right, like their total addressable market just starts expanding, because now it's not just like this common denominator service, but now also I can add more services that could be more custom to more people. And so the way I picture this, it's just like the TAM just gets bigger for software companies, but that's more because they're eating up the services industry in a way.
So in this world where software and services like almost merge, do we still have a need for software?
That's a very interesting question. So picture what we'd want today, right? Running a company. So if, let's say, if money, costs, margins weren't an issue, right? Wouldn't every company want all the services they can get as custom as possible to their specific needs? The only reason why we don't have 20 assistants doing from like booking meetings to finding leads, it's probably because of cost. It's just not economically feasible. And so I think that if you could have it all with no constraints on cost or budget, we would always want the most personalized things to our productivity. In that world, I think everyone just needs services. Like product is the best thing you can have when you don't have services. It's like, let me find what's common about what all these people want to do, and then just find the thing that I can repeat, the thing that I can just, there's just like a lowest common denominator that I can use to serve all these customers scalably, to serve them at a reasonable unit cost. I don't think that is what people want. People just want things that work for them, exactly for them, for their exact workflow, right? It's just the nature of humans and what we want.
Yeah, I think in the world where we can deliver custom solutions to direct to end user, a lot of intermediate products, a lot of intermediate software are going to be obsolete. For example, say you want to watch animated video, and there are so many products in between. there's a Photoshop, there's a video editor, maybe a storage. Then there's another software where people can comment on the videos and edit. And there's another software where people write scripts and collaborate. Then there's another where people upload the videos so others can see it. But in the world where I just want to watch a video and then there's ML model on my laptop that just produces the videos directly to me, all those intermediate steps are going to be gone. So this is obviously more of an extreme case, but I can see the world where a lot of the intermediate software no longer needed.
Yeah, I think that is true. So what you're saying is there's a lot of products that are like a point solution to a very specific workflow. I think the reason why we have that, it's because everyone's workflow is different, or you like to operate in a slightly different way. And so when a product A doesn't meet that workflow that you would prefer, you just look for another product provider that has mental model that's more aligned to how you think, or they have a similar experience and they can build for that experience. I think these proliferation of a lot of different point solutions that do the same thing but slightly differently is actually to adapt to the fact that people want something that works better for them. And in a world that's really big with a lot of customers, there's enough market for there to be a lot of these companies to exist. I think that's why we see that happening to begin with. It's because people want more custom things for their work. But now, okay, so if you remove some of the challenges and constraints of a UI or a UX, and you can combine multiple tasks, in theory, you could generate workflows that kind of suit the needs for that specific customer better. So I think probably that's what it means. It just means less software companies that are doing point solutions and maybe more of these more dynamically generated type of solutions based off of a similar product. And maybe that's what makes like the software market small, but at the same time, what makes the software market bigger is just this move into services, move into custom that will be cheaper and cheaper to do. And
I
so
think there'll still be like a need for a software, but it's probably going to be more around the infrastructure. So infrastructure that aids a lot of this Gen. So for example, I can see a need for a model or like a tool that would fact check the results. And that model could be like a lot smaller. That tool could be a lot simpler because all it needs to do is given a response of your model, can you go look up in a database of facts whether or not the response that you got is factual. But I feel like we would still need something like that. And that's the reason adoption of current AI, it's not as widespread because it's great. Whatever you can produce is great, but you cannot verify that. And especially if you're selling the output of those models, it has to be factually correct.
do you mean to prevent hallucinations from models?
Yeah, to prevent hallucinations. And then for code, right, you probably need another tooling that would run unit tests on the resulted code.
Yeah, I see that too. I think it's going to be really important. I wanted to now switch it up a little bit and talk about some of the startups and some of the companies are doing some interesting stuff. So I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you see this. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was this GitHub Copilot workspace thing, because we touched a little bit on code today and how software development may change as a result of AI. I actually had missed it until recently. I discovered that this was launched and I took a look at it and I was obviously very excited because it really will make development a lot easier, at least easier to get started and spin up a few projects. So I think they have this approach where you have a task and then it builds a plan. I see this as a very common pattern for automating some of the work that you just can't automate in one shot. It's almost as if you were prompting multiple times and then getting like results for each smaller prompt and then build up like a full solution from it. It's like breaking down a big problem into smaller tasks and then if you manually prompt for each task and put it all together at the end, it just does that for you. This is a pattern. I don't know if that's the only pattern we'll see in terms of how we solve problems, but it's a fairly logical one to address these. So what these guys do is they just build a plan and then they show you the generate code basically for the different steps in the plan. And then the developer can just edit it and then check it. So going back to what you were saying, people are going to be mostly verifying, checking the work, maybe tweaking a little bit. This kind of encompasses all of that stuff that we're talking about. What were your reactions when you saw this Copilot workspace launched?
I've been a heavy user of Copilot ever since they came out. I think it saves quite some time for me. It's like a better autocomplete. But with this, I can take it to the next level where you can actually request almost feature or bug fixes. I'm curious to try. I don't know about the limitations. For example, if your code base is fairly large, I'm still reaching out some limits.
I believe so.
So yeah, I'm curious how long you can do it for, because the attention, the deeper you go, fades away. Sometimes I notice it goes back into loop, making the same mistakes. I'm curious to try this.
Yeah, me too. This is quite exciting. I remember back in my computer science classes in school, I did remember setting things up to be like one of the biggest hurdles in starting to build something or starting to learn how to code. You had different machines, like Windows machines, Linux, Ubuntu, Mac, and it's just a bunch of different stuff. And so just setting up to get started was quite hard. And then over time, we've seen more and more tools like Replit, like they make it easier to get started. And in this, it's not just easier to get started, but easier to start with a framework or some sort of skeleton for your next software project. I think that's just going to make it so fast to start a project. Now, let me switch a little bit. And then I don't know if you've heard about these guys, Voice AI for Developers. Recently met one of the co-founders there, and it's really cool. So they provide APIs to do basically voice automation. So they have these agents that sound really human, and you can have a conversation with them. They combine a bunch of models together and they provide this technology, right? And so this technology can be used, for example, to build an automated call center, inbound calls, outbound calls. And they have a bunch of use cases here, right? Like barbershops, doing bookings, dentist office. Obviously, it looks like a lot of bookings, clearly, but I don't see why they can't use it to handle calls for call centers, customer support, or just to get information about stuff. And I don't know if we will be able to stream this.
You can try and I'll let you know if I can hear it.
Sure. Okay. Let's try this. I'm doing well. How are you?
We cannot hear it.
I didn't see an option to do this, unfortunately. So I'll let the audience go and try it. Just click on this button and then just have a conversation with this product, see how you feel. But this to me is some of the technology that can enable some of these automation of services or help software companies build more like into services with this kind of tech. And the other thing is just there's this company called Greenlight, and they also use AI to just automate compliance processes for companies. So compliance processes, usually it's just very labor intensive. Like you have someone actually reviewing stuff, and then they just make it 10 times faster or more to do compliance for banking operations or fintech operations. So typically, if you run one of these companies, you would have hired an outsourced agency where they have people helping you basically do compliance, right? Review all the documents, look things up, and then confirm whether or not this customer is who they say they are. I think now we're seeing this transition where there's more and more tools like this that can just help you do it. That's one of the examples of just software companies offering services basically with the help of AI. Okay, so those are some of the companies that I wanted to cover. One thing I forgot to cover is, did you know that there's one offering that companies like Salesforce, Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP offer that brings in billions and billions of dollars in revenue? So Salesforce, $2+ billion, Microsoft, $8+ billion, Oracle, $5.5 billion, SAP, $4 billion. So collectively, these companies brought in like $20 billion. Just last year, in 1 year alone, 4 companies generated $20 billion with a single offering. What do you think that offering is?
Certificates?
No, but I'm sure they make money from that too. So the professional services. So for
how to use their own product, right?
Basically how to use their own product, how to install it, how to customize it. And I have the numbers here. So Salesforce, $2+ billion, 7% of revenue generated from professional services. Microsoft, $8 billion. And that's 3% of the revenue. Oracle, 11% of revenue. And SAP, 13% of revenue coming from professional services. This is just, imagine the complexity required to use these products that are supposed to be software as a service. Yet there's basically 10% of revenue across all these big enterprise companies coming from just professional services. That's a lot of money, and that money is being paid for by clients who want a custom solution.
Do you think the incentives are aligned?
I'm not sure. So there's a lot here. I dig these numbers up from their financial statements from last year, 2023. And it seems to me strategically for these companies, professional services are a way to grow revenue, but also a way to actually grow their subscription businesses. And so it's almost as if it's a bit of a leverage to be able to grow, because with professional services, you guarantee that customer who bought a multi-million dollar enterprise software actually uses it, actually installs it, and feels successful with having spent the millions of dollars buying the software. And at this level, like this enterprise software, when you fully implement one of these solutions, it takes multiple months, sometimes multiple years, and you're basically connecting all of your enterprise data systems to this system. And one interesting thing that I did when I looked at the financials is that I realized that the cost of offering these services is really high. So they're almost offering it at cost, basically. When you see the breakdown, go to the Microsoft full year earnings report from last year, and it says revenue from professional services, 8 billion. Cost of offering professional services, 8 billion or something. I can't remember the numbers, so don't quote me on that. But I looked at multiple companies, and the cost of offering that service, it was very close to the revenue it generates. So it doesn't do much to their margins, right? But it's a great way to get a new revenue stream, but also it's like a multiplier factor on retention for their main software business, and also for growth, because now you're a big enterprise. You're like, oh, okay, they also have professional services. So I feel comfortable that I will be able to implement this, that there's some help because they understand their system. And so I'll be able to install this well. And this professional service revenue, it's only the ones that it's directly offered by these companies. There's multi-billion dollar industries out there also offering professional services for these same products. And I believe that number is a much, much bigger revenue number than the ones offered by the software companies themselves. Think about this. There's tons of consulting firms, tons of agencies. There's like full companies specialized in just one cloud or one product. Like we just do Salesforce consulting, and that's like a multi-million dollar business. We just do SAP HANA, like a very specific module within one of these big enterprise companies. This is all services for them.
What do you think is going to happen to all those industries when AI can offer the services? Do you think they'll adopt, or do you think it's going to be a startup?
I think it's adapt or die. I don't think there's really a choice. So all the software companies will try as much as possible, or as technically feasible as possible, to build into the services business. It's just too big of a market for software companies to not go after. And so what that means for the agencies, for the outsourced service providers, or I think even some of the other more professional services, like high-end professional services, I think they would probably want to be more competitive, especially for the things that are more task or operations oriented. When it's more like, how do we build a communication strategy and how do we coach people, that thing might still have to be just done in person or in the same way. But for more task oriented things, I think it's going to be competitive for them. So service providers will have to either start building software, which is now easier than ever to do, or they can buy software to also become more competitive and like hold the encroachment from other software companies until they can have a strategy to offer those services lower and lower costs. So now it sounds really bad. It sounds like all these margins are going to be eaten up in the service providers. I think overall, it's more productive for the world. Imagine if we can offer a personal customer support agent for every single one of your users, even if that user is just paying you $5 a month subscription for your product. That's going to be an amazing experience for that customer. And if you can offer it, I don't see any company that wouldn't offer it, because it just makes sense. This is what everybody wants. And so it's going to be tough. It's going to be competitive. I think there's some ways, there's some strategies that service providers can do. It's really to keep up with what's happening. The advantage they have is they have real customer interactions. They know what customizations people are doing. They know what people want. They know the workflow. They even have some of the customer relationships already. So I think it's about survival too. It's a long-term thinking, but it will be competitive for sure.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So the software part is still going to be there. So that's what like the main product that they offer. And then the consulting, the professional services, I think they would be in the best position to offer them to begin with, because they would have access to all the internal documentation, all the APIs. So maybe they can optimize it or build it in a way so bots can generate like apps, deploy infrastructure properly.
So do you mean Salesforce, Microsoft, they'll be in a better position to offer them?
Yes. Say there's like a GPT-5, right? Which
Mhm.
is amazing at everything. But I think those companies like SAP and Microsoft, in order to keep their margins with those professional services, they'll probably be training their own versions of GPT-5, like fine-tuning them specifically. And a lot of that information would have to be proprietary. So I'm not sure how products like Terraform, if they would change, because some of the APIs are not going to be accessible publicly. So
Oh,
like,
no, I think for the cloud providers, for example, I think they're highly incentivized to allow API access to their services. So let's say you work with AWS and you need to spin up like an S3 or an EC2. I think they'll always need a way to be able to trigger those services with APIs, even if they have like some sort of chatbot thing, like Copilot that interacts with it behind the scenes. It's like natural language to API basically, and then trigger those services. I just don't see it not being available.
yeah, because like you said, they don't really make money out of these professional services, right? They mostly
Yeah.
use like a little trap, like, okay, you built all of this on my info, like we're gonna go now. I'm gonna keep using my product. So yeah, they are incentivized to like making it as easy as possible to customize solutions for others
Yeah.
on their product.
I think it's fairly strategic. I don't know how much these companies care about the revenue. Okay, if it's 10% of revenue for a public company, they will care about it. But I don't know if that's their main thing. I think it's more about building that customization. It's about getting really deep into the companies, and it's about being able to help those customers succeed with that software. I think when you're 10% of revenue, you also can't ignore the revenue stream from it. Now, wouldn't it be great if those 10% of revenue could be delivered at software margins for these companies? Then it's, oh, then now we're talking. Now it's not just the 10% revenue, it's the full margin that comes with it. From their software business, their margins are incredible. If you just look at their financial statements, it's like hundreds of tens of billions of dollars. And the cost of goods sold or cost of delivering that software service, it's 10-20% of it. And then you look at the breakdown for the professional services and it's completely different. It's like basically at cost. But if that could be margins that look like software, then I don't see why they just offer more of it directly. It's a great business for them. So that was a nice chat. There's other topics or other ideas that we'd love to talk about. So we'll probably try to do these once in a while and just get the conversation flowing, share stuff that we're learning from around the area, what people are talking about in SF and the whole world of AI. So with that, let's just wrap it up here. Thanks, everybody.